What is unethical as duck but extremely common in the business world? Hiring only part-time employees and making them work just under the full-time limit so you don't have to give them benefits. Violating the law because the fine isn't enough to eliminate the profit from the act. That'd change real quick if the law was that they had to pay the penalty of a fine plus surrender all profits made as a result of having broken that law. Not profits. Revenue is where it is at. Profit is easily disguised and hidden away. Offering benefits at a certain amount of hours and then keeping the vast majority of your workforce just under the qualifying hours. I worked at a place that made someone take their vacation time, 2 weeks, and then pulled their insurance for being just under for the quarter. I soon quit that place too. It's weird that the vacation time didn't count as hours worked for the purposes of insurance. Making large cuts and drastically diminishing the capabilities of your workforce. Then getting a major bonus pay raise promotion based on the cost savings. Then usually moving along to a new job before the consequences problems from the cuts begin to mount, cripple the organization, and it becomes painfully obvious how badly you screwed everything up and it is going to cost 4x as much just getting it back to where it was compared to how much you saved. This happens all the time at nearly every company. Taking on apprentices for 9 months and then firing them when they don't need them anymore. Basically label them as a full-on employee at meetings with clients too. Then they sack 80% of them all. Cheap labor. I saw this a lot working in retail. Management forcing or guilt-tripping staff to work overtime. Even if it's just an hour or so. Then not paying them for it. It's a huge way for companies to big dig over their staff and abuse them for their own gains. Common ways of doing this include rotoring them onto the tills for the last hour of their shift and then not relieving them or giving them a big task to complete and telling them they can't go home until they're done. It happens a lot in retail. I had this happen to me a few times when I was in high school. The company I worked for knew that I couldn't work more than 20 hours a week. So they lied to me and told me that I wouldn't. But we weren't allowed to leave at night until the store was clean. I told them time and again that I needed to leave by 10 PM so I could go to class earlier than any of them got up. I don't even remember if I gave them my 2 weeks. Unpaid internships. My younger brother recently had an internship. However, they didn't have money to pay him. And he had to bring his own laptop. And they didn't have office space for him. So he had to work out of coffee shops and libraries. In my day, we just called that being unemployed. It's amazing how a little business management ingenuity can claim that's a job. Pulling a Milton on someone. They won't let someone go because they don't want to pay them severance. So instead they gradually make them miserable until they quit on their own. It's super shitty. Discouraging people and making it taboo to speak about salaries. You want to fix low wages, then let everyone know that the new guy is getting $5 more an hour than people who have been there 4 years even though he has less experience. Many skill sets increase more in value year by year than the pay raises do. This is far too common. It seems young people are getting wise to it though. As we constantly lose talented people going to competitors to do the same job for more money. Myself included in the next couple of months. Exploding job offers and classifying employees as independent contractors. I work for a law firm that primarily deals with workers' compensation. I think it's funny when employers classify their employees as independent contractors to get out of paying for workers' compensation insurance. And then their injured workers come to us when they need medical care. The employer feeds us the BS that they're not paying because IW is an independent contractor. So we take them to court and the judge always orders them to pay up. I got sick of watching management charge higher fees to loyal customers because they knew these people trusted the relationship and management knew the customer would not shop around. I thought that was ducked up. Non-compete agreements for regular employees. If your expertise is in a certain sector, these basically make it difficult or impossible for you to find work in your field if you leave. Fortunately, they are unenforceable in progressive states like California, but much of the US allows companies to screw you like this. I had a non-compete as a regular employee and changed companies. My old employer told me they were going to sue me. I told him to have fun. They said we can win this case and I laughed and said you can. But there's nothing for you to take. So go ahead and sue me, I'm broke. They never sued me. Not telling huge amounts of people that they're going to be fired until the day it happens. It really sucks because it's often not because of something they did, disciplinary. If it was, they could expect it and look for something else. No. They just let the people work as normal and drop a bombshell, telling them to get the duck out. IMO, the unlimited vacation policy that has been plaguing the tech world lately. The reality is it's just a way to not have to pay out PTO. Specifically in California where PTO can't expire going paid by law. People end up taking far less time off. I think the average is 12 days per year. There was a study not too long ago. I also personally think it makes people feel more obligated to stay connected while on PTO or for people at work to contact you. It's sold as some amazing perk. Trust me, it isn't. It really comes down to the company culture and your direct manager. The most recent place I worked at had an unlimited vacation policy. And my manager was always very good about it. I took 4-5 weeks off each year. And he never denied a vacation request. That said, I could very well see how it could go wrong. Listing a job with absolutely ludicrous requirements and insulting pay benefits. Then when nobody takes it, say there is a shortage in your industry and get work visas like H-1Bs to bring in people for far less money. This was super common in at work for the past few years. Don't know if it still is. Everybody was talking about the shortage of IT workers. There was no shortage. There were numerous unemployed IT workers and a huge amount of IT workers that had been laid off during the recession that were still looking for jobs. If companies wanted to hire IT workers, they had oceans of them to choose from. The reason they couldn't hire anybody is that they didn't actually want to. They made sure that nobody would take that job so they could get cheap workers in a visa program instead of paying American workers what they were worth. Underpaying employees. Putting employees on salary, then forcing them to work 60+ hours a week. And or advertising products as better than they are. Obligatory don't work in the business world. But I have a friend who does. He's relatively young. And it's insane how shitty his quality of life is for someone who works 60+ hours a week. A common thing in the oil field is third-party service companies' employees often work on call 24/7. Some of those workers are on work schedules like 14 days on and 14 off or 7 and 7 etc. Some of the really shady companies don't even offer days off. Your days off are whenever you are lucky enough to not be out on a job. Even with days off. It is not uncommon during the work itch to be out working for days at a time with very little to no sleep. These guys are out driving service trucks, operating heavy machinery, and working with dangerous materials, sometimes having not slept for days. Decent companies, really. There are no decent oil field companies, will keep enough workers employed so that everyone gets enough rest. The really shitty companies, most oil field companies are shitty, only operate with skeleton crews and just run the dog piss out of their employees until they quit or fire them for not answering their phones when getting called for a job. Full stop. I feel that invoice paper billing fees are absolutely ridiculous. Had to go to the doctor the other day. And they did not accept cash, instead they had a ATM-like paying station. However, it was out of order. Asked the lady behind the counter how I'd pay for my visit. If it was out of order? Oh. No problem. Here's an invoice you can pay from home. The paper billing fee was $6. But not wanting to justify the firing ordeal with all the hassle. So you spend 6 months or more assigning them nearly impossible tasks. With insufficient time or resources until capital A. Hate work so much that you break them and get them to quit for you. Or capital B. You build 6 months worth of paperwork showing the appearance of having given them a chance and them failing tasks and deadlines continuously. Having very few workers a day and expect them to cover twice as much work as with more employees. This is a shitty thing to do, especially for closing shifts. Probably insider trading. Like when top Equifax businessmen sold huge portions of stock right before news broke that there had been a massive leak of people's data. But don't worry. All those trades were definitely not made based on private information. Expecting people to sell their souls to make you money while they live paycheck to paycheck. Let's delve a little deeper into that. With all the bonuses being tossed out like high fives to upper management, who get even bigger bonuses for squeezing more drops of juice from their lemons. The lemon is we the pune. Oh, and golden parachutes. We've been paying you $7 million a year for a decade now. Sorry, but the shareholders think you're doing a terrible job and this is your notice. Here's a cool 5 mother-in-law to see you by until your next job. Planned obsolescence. Basically this explains why phones lease 2 years and most other appliances can be given a nice expiration replacement date. Manufacturers build in a breakdown so that customers must regularly come back. We learn about this in business school as though it's a totally legit business idea and not deliberately ripping off customers. Detroit did it with American-made autos for a long time. After the gas crisis of the 70s, 2 things became clear. 1. Japan could make smaller, more efficient vehicles, and 2. There was a substantially large amount of consumers who would only buy American-made cars. For the next 20 to 25 years, Ford, Chrysler and GM made inferior cars at a higher markup that had planned obsolescence engineered in. It worked as well as predicted until the greatest generation started dying off or got old to drive. Also predictably, the next generation weren't so keen on buying American-made vehicles that cost more $, were less reliable and didn't last as long. Dangling carrots. Designers are told do this one project for us for cheap to prove yourself and then we'll give you more work at market value. Next project they have, they'll find a different designer and tell them the same thing. I used to work at a company that had a habit of hiring people then sacking them just before the end of their probationary period, 6 months. During that period, employees were not entitled to sick pay, overtime, any employment benefits and reduced holiday. So people, myself included, would slave away with no holidays or sick pay and only doing the crappy menial jobs before getting sacked at 5.5 months with only 1 week notice and no severance. This is completely legal where I live, as employee rights don't apply unless you have been there at least a year. It sucks. Wage theft. Tax evasion. It's basically stealing millions from vulnerable school children and cancer patients. Taxes are theft. Tax evasion is theft. Age discrimination. Putting your partner and all the ex-partners on the payroll despite them not working there. It's just business. Basically any selfish practice in which the business profits is dismissed as business is business. If people's lives suffer while the business prospers, the business owners shrug it off as necessary and inevitable and feel zero remorse. Trumping. Do a deal with someone. Place them in a position where they are very dependent on your paying the bill and then start disputing things and renegotiate. So long as you have the pockets for lawyers, you can usually duck them good and avoid any liability. Incredibly common. Setting prices at one amount. Advertising that prices. And then tacking on a bunch of mandatory fees that aren't included in that price. I'm looking at you. Rental car companies. Corporations create operating companies with no assets and then use them to pollute or perform other activities that are detrimental to society. The holding company meanwhile sucks all the profits out of the operating company, and when the operating company is eventually sued they claim bankruptcy and claim they have no assets, leaving society to clean up the mess. I can't think of anything worse, and this is the general operating procedure for most large corporations. Nepotism. I got seriously screwed over. I was working a job for 10 years and was next in line for a crew chief position, which requires a ton of experience. Old crew chief leaves. Some higher ups 22 years old son's first day out of university with a degree that doesn't apply to the job. 100k plus a year job, has no idea what we do. Doesn't know anything or anybody. But he's the manager's son. He gets the job. So obviously I start to move on. Turns out they need me pretty badly after hours of negotiating. They gave me some fake position and now pay me 100k a year, but I still work under the son, who after 2 years is still clueless. So this guy is just a complete drain on the company. He has a poor work ethic. Says he's only their temporary act. None of the workers respect him. I could go on and on, but nepotism is still very real in the workplace. I work for a public billion-dollar company. Not paying invoices. Then once things are in collection, ask for proof of delivery or proof of work. A lot of small business are not well organized for this and they end up dropping the claim. Also, not paying an invoice. Let it go to collection only to negotiate a lower amount with a collection agency who is eager to get their percent fee. Very common with small businesses. Forcing people to work 7-day work weeks. 0-hour contracts in the UK. Not sure if it's the same in other countries, where on some weeks I can work over 40 hours a week and some only 15. When my manager could easily give us 25-30 hour contracts and additional hours for those that want it. Job I just left thinks temp workers shouldn't question why. After 3 years. They're still temps. Yeah, no. You're still a temp because we can't pay the benefits for you or pay you well. And we want to fire you whenever we want. I guess it's somewhat minor, but discouraging breaks or cheating workers out of breaks. In Australia, if you work 6+ hours, you're entitled to half an hour unpaid break. I worked for a company that got around this by limiting shifts to 5.5 hours. Though it was not uncommon to have to stay back 20-30 minutes late to finish closing the store. The first time I did a double shift, I asked when I was entitled to my break. And the manager was kind of like, well, okay. You are entitled to a break that you can take, but you don't have to have it. You can just eat your lunch in the back and keep serving if you want. Like, nah Michelle, I'm going to take my duck in break.